How do you do? Oh, allow me to introduce myself.
I am the last sane sports fan.
I am a genius by trade.
One and welcome to the View from the Midwest.
I just knew too much. Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Possibly.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the View from the Midwest. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the NHL, more specifically the St. Louis Blues. I'd like to do a playoff preview, and I'm going to try to do that within the next couple days, but since the season doesn't end until, I believe, the 28th is the last regular season game, and everything is too close to predict the playoff matchups yet, we'll save that for another show. But the topic that I wanted to talk about right now is the St. Louis Blues goaltending situation. And let me preface this by saying that I am a Yaroslav Halak fan. I think that I was really excited when the St. Louis Blues picked him up because I saw how well that he played in the Olympics, leading his team into the medal round, and the quality with which he played, and also in his run with the Montreal Canadiens. I was surprised. I thought that they were going to let Carey Price go, and given the way that Carey Price has played, I would have been perfectly happy if the Blues had managed to pick him up as well. But having said that, I entered into this phase of the Blues goaltending situation being a Yaroslav Halak fan. I thought Brian Elliott was a decent pickup. I mean, he would be a solid backup, and I thought that's where it was going to be. Now, as usually happens with the St. Louis goaltending situation, injuries and mediocre to poor play always comes into it, no matter who you've had, except for Curtis Joseph in the early stages of his career with the team, and Grant Fuhr. Other than that, the St. Louis Blues goaltending situation has been a mess, to say the least, because of inconsistencies at best. Even when you got solid goaltending in the regular season from people like Roman Turek, then he would inexplicably allow a half-ice goal in the playoffs. And you can't have that kind of stuff if you're going to try to win the cup. But the thing that's going on with the St. Louis situation right now that makes it intriguing is St. Louis now has gone from what I would have considered at the very beginning is a definite situation of Halak's number one, Elliott's number two, and Ben Bishop was down in the minors waiting for his opportunity, to a situation now where who's the number one goaltender going forward? Going into the playoffs, you almost have to figure that it's going to be Brian Elliott. Elliott has played extremely well in the month of April, and hopefully he can continue it into the playoffs. And if not, then the Blues will explore those opportunities when they come. But having said that, moving forward, what does the team do? And those are the kind of questions that I'm interested in. And I'm not looking towards the future already. It's like I'd like the Blues to make a Stanley Cup run. I think they have the talent to do it, depending on the matchups that they would have to play in the playoffs. But looking forward, what happens with the goaltending situation? Because you have three potential number one goaltenders in terms of talent. You have Yaroslav Halak, who I still believe can be a solid number one goaltender in this league. You have Brian Elliott, who has shown flashes of brilliance the last couple years, but you have to wonder about his consistency, because when he's looked bad, he's looked really bad. But when he's looked great, he looks fantastic, like he should be a starter in this league. And then you have Jake Allen, who came out of nowhere this year. Quite honestly, a lot of fans were just hoping that he could not allow 2 or 3 goals a game and keep this team afloat. Well, he did much better than that. He played beyond his years. He played with a lot of composure And he led this team in the middle of a season when they were possibly looking like they could go from winning the Central Division last season to missing the playoffs in this season. So Jake Allen has been an extremely pleasant surprise. Beginning next year, you have to start basing it purely on the talent that you think they have, and how much longer can you realistically figure that you can keep Jake Allen down in the minors if that is indeed their plan of action. Now, obviously, I'm open to discussion on these sorts of things, and I'd love to see some of your comments either on Facebook or on YouTube under the comment section there. And who do you think should be the number one goaltender going forward? What do you think is going to be the dynamic going into the future? They can't do, obviously the Blues can't do what they did this season, which was keep 3 goaltenders up on the roster for a good chunk of the season. Somebody's got to go down to Peoria. I would have to assume that if anybody does, that's going to be Jake Allen, because he's the only one with a contract that would allow that to happen. But do you really want him to go back down? Do you think maybe that one of these other 2 goaltenders could be trade bait coming into the offseason, obviously? Going forward, the discussion that I started earlier, and in my roundabout way of rambling, we'll get back to, is I honestly think that the battle for the number 2 spot, or 1B, however you want to see it, I think it'll come down to Brian Elliott and Jake Allen, because I just have a hard time coming to grips with the fact that if Yaroslav Halak had never gotten hurt, he would be the number 1 goaltender. He was the number 1 goaltender coming into last year. He struggled a little bit. Elliott picked up the slack. They had a great 1-2 tandem, and that's what the Blues were going to do into this season, was use them as a 1 and a 1A or 1B, or however you want to think of it. But Halak was going to be the majority starter. And then he struggles a little bit. They put Elliott in there. He struggles just as mightily. Then Halak gets hurt. They have to bring up Allen, and so on and so forth, and so goes the season. But even when Elliott was, when Halak came back and Allen had played so great, they were putting Halak back in that starting role. So I still have to believe that given all the opportunities that these other goaltenders have had to solidify themselves as a number 1 goaltender, which I think they have, I think if they were given opportunities, either with this team or perhaps a future team that is not the St. Louis Blues, I think they could be number 1 goaltenders. But I think Halak is the man that the Blues are going to use in the pipes for the majority, unless something unforeseen happens. The argument that I make against Elliott is I think Allen has the talent to be a number 1 goaltender by himself. Now, would he be a good 1A to Halak or not? I think so, because he's proven that he can do that in the middle of the season. Now, so did Brian Elliott last year. Again, the case that I make against Elliott, and I like Elliott, I would be perfectly fine with him staying through the duration of his contract and perhaps longer if he keeps up the play that he has shown of late. But I think that what was wrong with Brian Elliott is I don't think he is a number 1 goaltender by himself, and fans are going to disagree with me.
Shut up! You don't know nothing about anything.
That's their right. But he has shown that if you look back to the playoffs last year and the times when he was the number 1 goaltender by himself when Yarrow was hurt earlier in the season, he has shown that if he does not know in the back of his head that he has got a solid goaltender to come in if he makes a couple of mistakes and give him a little bit of a time off or a breather or whatever, that he doesn't seem to perform very well. And people are going to be like, well, he had such a great year last year, and he's had such a great year this year after coming back from the AHL. And I agree. I'm not disputing any of that fact. But he's been with enough teams in the past. If you look at Ottawa or Colorado, he was given the opportunity to be a number one goaltender, and they let him go because he wasn't performing up to the specifications that they deemed a quality number one goaltender. And he has done the same thing with St. Louis so far. If he's had Yaroslav Halak behind him, or once he knew how good Jake Allen was, he's played spectacularly. And when it was just him back in the playoffs last season against LA, when it was just him and he didn't know how good Jake Allen could be coming in after Yaroslav Halak got hurt, he hasn't played up to par. And I think that that is just his mindset. I think that he can be a good, solid goaltender. He can be a good 1A, 1B, however you want to look at it. And he will give you the kind of steady goaltending with some spectacular saves that you need, as long as he's got that solid goaltender behind him or in front of him. But if he is the lone wolf, like a Marty Brodeur was for a long time in New Jersey, then I don't think that he can live up to those standards. I don't think he can take the weight of the team entirely on his shoulders and be like, I'm going to carry us all the way. I'm going to play 50, 60, 70 games and lead us to the playoffs and possibly a Stanley Cup. So my ultimate goal going forward is I think Halak should regain his starting spot. And obviously this is going to be all in a battle for the position in training camp. I think they should bring all three back and give all three an attempt to see what they can do come training camp next season. But if all goes well and everybody plays up to their capabilities, I think it would be Halak and Allen going forward for this team. Maybe not next year, but I think those two would be the future of the team. And then perhaps they could find a good spot for Elliott via trade, because I think he has increased his value tenfold the way that he has come back. Sticking with this topic along the goaltenders, one thing that I do find interesting, and I know that it applies to fans all over the league. I know it has to, but it seems specifically over the top here in St. Louis, is fans are ready to kick a goaltender out of the league completely after one or two games, and then they're ready to say that he's the second coming after another game. And I think Brian Elliott is a perfect example of that, because if the fans had gotten their wish at the beginning of the year, they would have either cut him, they would have put him through waivers, and I can't say that I didn't agree with trying to put him through waivers when the situation was you had three goaltenders on the team and Brian Elliott was sitting up in the press box, because back then it made sense. But given the injury history that this team seems to have with goaltenders, I'm glad that they didn't, and the way things worked out, I'm glad that they didn't. But previous to all that, the fans were ready to ride him out on a rail. Now all of a sudden, you read the post-game comments or the text into the shows, or however fans choose to voice their opinion. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, Elliott, we need to ride him the rest of the season and keep him in there, and he's the one that's going to lead us to the cup. And it's like 2 months ago, maybe not even that, you guys were ready to kick him out of town, and now all of a sudden he's the one that's going to help us win it all. So I just find it a little bit funny, and the way St. Louis fans seem to voice their opinions, specifically when it comes to the position of goaltending, I just find their opinions slightly ludicrous. But time will tell who it will be the St. Louis netminder going forward. I think that it should be 41 and 34, but it could be any combination thereof, and I wouldn't be totally heartbroken. I would be a little upset if Halak ended up being the odd man out, but given the way that both of the other Canadian goaltenders have performed this season, it would not be 100% shocking given that fact. That'll wrap it up for this edition of The View from the Midwest. Again, I will try to do a NHL playoff preview within the next few days, but we all know how that goes. Sometimes I intend to do some videos and just don't get around to it. So we'll see. Until next time, I'll see you later.
I remember when I lost my mind. There was something so pleasant about that place. Even your emotions have an echo in so much space. And when you're out there without care,